It's Belgium's biggest and oldest place of Muslim worship, and now the government wants to take it over. They say it's home to Saudi-backed extremism. Last month, they moved to expel the mosque's imam, citing national security concerns. But that's been blocked by the courts. Yet the country is still under intense pressure to tighten security, with several Belgian citizens involved in European terror attacks. If the takeover of Brussels Grand Mosque goes ahead, will that put an end to radicalisation, or could it further alienate Belgian Muslims? Well, to discuss this, we're joined now from Brussels by Michael Privot. He is the director of the European Network Against Racism. And in Vienna, Farid Hafiz, he's a lecturer at the University of Salzburg, as well as a scholar with Georgetown University's Islamophobia research project known as the Bridge Initiative. Thanks for joining us, gentlemen. Michael, should the state be taking over this mosque?
Thank you.
Well, I think that's a move that can be understandable from the point of view of the internal Belgian politics. But I think, if you allow me, that we need to put a few things in context. So as you might be aware of, Belgium as a state recognized Islam as an official religion in 1974. And immediately there was an agreement between the King of Belgium at the time and the King of Saudi Arabia to give over or to lend that building, which has become the Grand Mosque, for 99 years. That mosque has been the center actually of many important things, because for nearly 20 years until the mid-90s, it has been like the center for Muslims to turn to get information about their religion, because at that point in time, Morocco and Turkey, which were the countries where the most important Muslim communities in Belgium were coming from, and not really started to invest in the field of Islam so far. So it played the center, the Islamic center, the Grand Mosque, played a very important role in the organizing of Islam in Belgium. And that was that role, lost a little bit of traction, as in the mid-90s there was the setting up by the Muslims themselves of the executive of Muslims in Belgium. And therefore the mosque was less important in terms of the organizing of Islam, but remained very central in terms of disseminating information about Islam. Any mosque or any individual could just call the mosque and ask, for books about Islam, for Qur'ans. They've been sending out youngsters born in Belgium to study in Saudi Arabia, in Medina in particular, and come back and teach about Islam in the very specific way that was taught to them in Medina. They have been operating for a couple of decades, I think, a social service whereby Muslims could come and have fatwas about every aspect of their life. So they've been very at the cutting edge of disseminating a very conservative, very Islam, very close to the official position of Saudi Arabia about Islam. And then the final thing, I think, which has been triggering, is that there has been questions about the role, finally, of the type of Islam that's been so vastly disseminated in Belgium, and questions have been raised for more than a decade. Of course, after the bombings in Paris and definitely in Brussels, a number of voices have been, including from within the Muslim communities, have been asked that Belgium take over the mosque back. And the fact is, and I'm just in a minute, that during the parliamentary inquiry that just closed after 1.5 years of work, when the responsible individuals at the mosque were called in, they really showed a lot of disdain towards the parliamentarians and the Belgian elected people, and that, of course, did give a very bad image of the Grand
understood.
Mosque.
I've got to bring Farid in.
I think it has been also contributing for...
I've got to bring Farid in. Farid, okay. So do you understand? Belgium has had its issues with terrorism recently. The Brussels attacks were awful, and I guess not least because so many of the attackers came from within. They came from Molenbeek. They were children of the soil, right? Belgium's going, hey, how can we undercut the ideological underpinnings here? We seem to have a problem with a masjid which has Salafi Wahhabi ideology at its core. Maybe we need to look at this. Do you understand where they're coming from, Farid, and why they might want to take over the mosque?
Well, there is two things to say at this point. I think, first of all, I'm not so much into this very specific case, but you always have to ask a very specific question, which is, in this case, has the mosque anything to do with the terrorists? And if the imam at the mosque has preached violence or terrorism, and as far as I've understood this was not the case, then you can talk about these issues of of trying to interfere. And interference in that sense would mean like you bring this person to court, a person who incites violence and terrorism. But if this is not the case, and we have a very generalized debate which fools into racist discourse, then we have to be very cautious here. The other thing is like a general tendency which I would say we can observe throughout Europe is that many European nation states and governments have an attempt and show an attempt, especially by the ministries of interior, to take control and to try to define what the religion of Islam should look like. And I think that's a very problematic aspect.
Right.
So
Right.
on the one side, you understand that the state wants to control, but that's always the question like how much can he interfere really into issues of religion? How liberal should he be?
Right.
And what really like the limits of pluralism are?
Okay, so Michael, two things here. Firstly, has there been any evidence, actionable, empirical evidence that shows that there was a link between the imam or whatever was said in the mosque and a terror attack? And secondly, when I put this into context and I look at the Brussels mayor, Ivan Meyer, saying, everyone knows that all mosques in Brussels are in the hands of Salafists. That's quite a big statement, right? Everyone? I mean, how can he be so sure? When I think of those two things, Farid has a point, doesn't he? It seems as if the Belgians are trying to kind of use a very blunt instrument in trying to solve their problems of extremism.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, there is, well, in the public, there is absolutely no clear evidence that there is a link between some statements of the imam of the Grand Mosque and the fact that he would have been himself or the team of the mosque radicalizing young people towards violent extremism and sending them to join Daesh. That's absolutely clear. And well, unless there, well, at least in the public, what we can know, there is nothing of that sort. The other statement of the previous mayor of Brussels is completely an overstatement, and he was totally denounced as such by all sides of within the communities and also within the larger public debate, saying there's a sweeping statement that is actually very harmful and polarizing further the population. But the fact is that in Brussels in particular, indeed, I mean, the Salafi ideology has been going quite far and is very, very widespread today. So that's also a fact. But
right.
Saying that most of the mosques and so forth, this is completely an overstatement.
Yeah.
Now the point is, it's very true that what I think that the Belgian government is trying to say, of course, is they need to do something. And I think that reclaiming the mosque is something that can show to the population like, hey, we did something. We are trying to confront Salafi / Wahhabi type of Islam, and look, we are effectively doing something. Right. But the point is I'm sure until now, and I have no clear sign that what's the next step. They don't know. So there has been, as I said, signals that they could ask the executive of Muslims in Belgium, which I think would be the good institution to talk to take over that mosque. Where I would slightly disagree with Farid is that indeed there is an increasing tendency from European states to try to mingle into Islam and to try to mold it one way. But I think they are not at that point yet. For now, what they are trying to do is to work on what is the concrete logistical side of Islam, not going into theology and those kind of things.
Okay.
Actually, they are not telling what they would like to see, but what they don't want to see.
Interesting. Okay.
And so this is the kind of signal that they are sending and that we should take seriously.
So let's get Farid very finally. Farid, I mean, the fact that they're saying Saudi-funded Salafi Wahhabi Islam, does it suggest to you that they see all Salafis as being potentially violent, whereas that's not quite the case? I mean, they want to do something, right? They don't want to have a state of emergency forever. They don't want to have continuous night raids in poorer areas which are invariably Muslim and so on. They want to get to the source of it and attack bad ideas. But are they looking at it incorrectly by smearing all Salafis? Is that how you see it, Farid?
Well, again, I mean, here the problem really is, and I really abstain from using terms like Salafi because Salafi is a very fuzzy notion. And you can possibly apply it to everyone or nobody as much as you want, right? Because it's kind of a very politicized discourse. So Salafi in a historical sense, you could say if Muhammad Abdu was Salafi and everything that has something to do historically with that, then potentially every Muslim today is a Salafi, from the Gülen movement to the Muslim Brotherhood. Or if you want to say, well, Salafi is this kind of conservative understanding of religion, then again, you have to really raise the question, like, you can like it or not, but do you really want to interfere in it? And I just give you like one very specific example. Let's say, for instance, and this is what I have understood from also the discussions that are going on in Belgium today, the imam, for instance, was arguing that Sunni Muslims should not marry to Shia women. Well, you might say that's a very sectarian view, and that's right? I mean, he's very much excluding between different groups of the Muslim population, but at the very same time you might also find on the Jewish side people who would say, well, a Jewish woman should not marry a non-Jewish man. So what do you do here? Do you want to interfere because that's too conservative, or is it like where do you draw the borders?
Right, understood.
Okay, so this is really an issue of human rights and freedom of religion, how far you can go, and really, and that's what about it is when I say they really want to define what a good Islam looks like and what a bad Islam looks like.
Right.
And Michael said the good thing would be if they handed over to the Council of Muslims. Well, I may agree with him in this concrete example, but we should look at it from a broader picture, because today it's maybe the Council of Muslims, tomorrow it is a self-made Muslim institution by the government officials that really follows another strategy. And the core question really is, like, how much power should we give any government, be it a monarchy in a Muslim country or a democracy in a Western country, and how much influence should we give them to interfere into the landscape of Muslim organizations, mosques, etc.?
Okay, strong point, Michael and Farid. I'd love to go on, but I have to move on. I thank you both for joining us here on the Newsmakers. It's been good to get both your thoughts.